You know, commercial aviation is actually one of the safest industries on the entire planet. But that amazing safety record creates a really fascinating problem. How in the world do you prevent accidents that basically never happen? Well, we're going to dive into a study that tackles that exact question, and what it found could totally change how you think about leadership, not just in the cockpit, but everywhere.
The best way to think about this is like a detective story. Because accidents are so rare, it's almost impossible for safety experts to find the clues, the warning signs that a disaster could be looming. We can't afford to just wait for something to go wrong. So the whole investigation has to be about predicting the future, not just reacting to the past. And that leads to the central mystery we're trying to solve. Right? How do you spot these hidden dangers in a system that, on the surface, looks like it's working perfectly? That is the puzzle. And to solve it, we need a place to start looking for clues. We need a map to help us find those hidden hazards.
And our first big clue comes from a really famous model in safety science. It gives us a blueprint of where failures really begin long before any incident ever takes place.
So this is James Reason's Swiss cheese model, and it basically shows that big accidents don't happen because of one single mistake. They happen when the holes in all these different layers of defense just happen to line up perfectly. But look, see that very first slice of cheese on the far left? Organization and management decisions? The model tells us, flat out, that the first and most critical line of defense is an organization's leadership. So that's exactly where our investigation has to start. Okay, so if leadership is where it all starts, we need to figure out what specific human factors could predict whether a workplace is safe or unsafe. For our detective story, the study focuses on three main suspects. Let's meet them.
First up, we've got burnout. This is when people are just so emotionally drained that they get cynical and start to feel like they're not making a difference. You can probably imagine how that might not be great in a job where safety is everything.
A second suspect is called tolerance for ambiguity. Now, in aviation, things can get complicated and confusing in a heartbeat. Someone with a low tolerance for that ambiguity might see those fuzzy situations as a threat, and that could lead them to make some bad calls.
And our third and final suspect, authentic leadership. This is the leader who, walks the talk. They're open, they have a strong ethical code, and they actually listen to what their team is telling them. It's not just about being a nice person, it's about being real.
So the first thing the researchers did was build a model. They wanted to see how well our first two suspects, burnout and tolerance for ambiguity, could predict what's called the safety climate, which is basically the overall vibe of how seriously people take safety. So now, let's look at the evidence. The study went out and surveyed 119 aviation pros to see how strongly each of our suspects was connected to that safety climate. The results were measured with a correlation score. The closer the number is to 1 or -1, the stronger the connection. Simple as that. First, let's look at burnout.
The correlation between burnout and the safety climate was -0.178. So yeah, there's a connection there. As burnout goes up, safety climate goes down, but honestly, it's pretty weak. Not exactly our smoking gun.
Okay, next up, tolerance for ambiguity. This came in at +0.312. All right, now we're getting somewhere. This is a more moderate connection. It means as someone's ability to handle confusing situations goes up, so does the positive safety climate. We're definitely getting warmer.
But then there's authentic leadership with a massive positive score of 0.664. I mean, that is a huge direct link. When people see their leaders as authentic, the safety climate is just dramatically better. It's pretty clear our investigation has found its prime suspect.
Now, a strong correlation is a great clue, but it isn't the whole story. The real question is, how much of a difference does this one factor actually make? This, right here, is where we find the smoking gun of our entire investigation. So what happens when you take that original model and just add authentic leadership into the mix with the other two? What's the real impact? Well, the answer is pretty staggering.
The model's power to predict a positive safety climate shot up by 35.1%. Let that sink in for a second. Just by adding the perception of authentic leadership, the model became over a third more accurate at figuring out if a workplace was safe. This wasn't just another clue, it was the key that unlocked the whole puzzle.
And you don't have to take my word for it. The study's abstract says it plain as day. This one factor had a statistically significant, massive impact. Authentic leadership isn't just a nice-to-have, it's a foundational pillar of safety.
So, what's the final verdict from our investigation? And maybe more importantly, why should a study about aviation safety matter to the rest of us, right? Well, this research really makes a powerful case for a whole new way of thinking about what it means to be a leader.
The takeaway is crystal clear. That Swiss cheese model was right on the money. Leadership is the absolute first line of defense. But this study shows that authenticity is the secret sauce. It proves that being transparent, ethical, and self-aware isn't some fluffy soft skill. It is a hard, measurable predictor of a safe and healthy workplace. It all comes down to this. If you want to create an environment where people feel safe enough to speak up, report problems, and trust each other, it has to start at the very top.
And that really brings us to our final thought. The pressure in aviation is immense. I mean, lives are on the line every single second. If authentic leadership can make that much of a difference in such a high-stakes environment, just imagine the impact it could have in your office, on your team, or in your community. What problems could you solve, not by creating more rules, but by having more authentic leaders?